not be with you, but I'm happy that finally the connection works. And I'm thankful for Fernando, who kindly invited me several weeks ago. And initially I was planning to join, but now we have to restrict it to a Zoom call. I will do my best to make it not too boring. I'm also very well aware that it's early in Spain, and this is an unusual time for you to listen to a scientific talk. I know that. So in the next roughly 15 minutes, I want to stick in time, I will talk about climate change and fungi. This is a complex topic, so there are various things that we have to distinguish when we talk about climate: temperature, precipitation, snow cover, frost events, so more extremes, slower trends, and so on. And these different factors, may or may not affect the productivity, phenology, and diversity of fungi directly or indirectly. So in the first instance, we should separate between mycorrhizal and subtropic fungi. In this talk, it is much more important to talk about mycorrhizal ones, so those that may be affected by climate indirectly through their host trees. It is important for this talk because very soon we jump into truffle, which is the topic of your conference anyways. So the current state of the Earth's climate system has been described, is described as an unprecedented threat facing humanity. So this is obviously a very strong statement. Now here in the UK, it is an overwhelming topic with COP26 in Glasgow currently going on. Everyone talks about climate change. And new evidence, so this is a record we published just earlier this year, shows that indeed, so you see on this time scale the last 2,100 years. So we go from present back into medieval times and then into Roman times. And the most recent summer droughts we experienced in Europe after 2015 are unprecedented. So these are the driest summers in the last 2,000 years in the Common Era. So you see there's a long-term trend superimposed on this very long-term drying trend. There are centennial, multi-decadal, and annual fluctuations. So the climate system is driven by different components, and drying is a combination, or is caused by a combination of higher temperatures and less precipitation. So we are facing drought, summer drought. The intensity and frequency of summer drought is expected to increase in the future, and we have to consider spatial differences. So we are sticking with Europe, north of the European Alps, so in Central Europe, drought is less an issue yet and will also not become one in the next 30 to 50 years, whereas the Mediterranean is much more prone to these extremes due to higher temperatures and also lack of precipitation. So you see precipitation changes predicted for the next 50 years. In the B panel, you see Spain, southern France, Italy, also the eastern part of the Mediterranean basin will experience a decline in precipitation totals. We talk about summer precipitation. And at the same time, this part of Europe, so southern Europe, will experience the strongest warming trend. And together, this is then creating drought, what we are facing as drought. Agricultural drought, meteorological drought, we have to distinguish there. But altogether, this affects the truffle production as other ecosystems, agriculture, and other agricultural systems. So irrigation is and will be an issue. So you see this image here, a truffle plantation very close to where you are now with the meeting. So in the Teruel region, you see there is indication for irrigation systems. There is still the question when and how much water should be put or given in the system, in which way. I would say this is still an open and ongoing question, but it is of larger scale. So you see the environment here. If you zoom out, you see, wow, this is of larger extent. So we are not just talking about some small regions. Extend further, the same issue. And here you also see up more on the upper left part of the image, two big water reservoirs. So water is an issue, irrigation is an issue. This will become more and more important. There will be competition for water. And what we did, published 2 years ago now, so time is flying, we were able to use information of natural summer precipitation between June and August, and using rainfall, summer rainfall, we could develop a model to predict truffle harvest or yield roughly 6 months later. So what you see in blue is the actual truffle harvest over the last 50 years, year-to-year fluctuations. There are years where the harvest, so everything happens between roughly December and February. So that's the main harvesting season of the Perigord truffle in the Northern Hemisphere. And the blue line are the actual values, and the dashed orange lines are our model. So they have no information about truffle harvest itself. They are purely based on summer precipitation, previous summer precipitation. And you can see how well the model is able to reproduce the following, or to predict actually the winter harvest. So this alone on its own shows us a high sensitivity of winter harvest, that how they depend on previous year summer precipitation. A very, very strong, statistically highly significant model. So what did we learn? What are the key findings? Black truffle production statistically significantly depends on previous June to August precipitation. Doesn't matter how much rainfall comes in spring, it also doesn't matter how much it rains after August. That means the timing and dose of current irrigation practices that are currently applied in Spain, but also in southern France, appear inappropriate to mitigate climate change effects. We see that because our model is mainly based on data from irrigated plantations. And still, the natural rainfall dictates the harvest. That is a critical point. Future directions. Innovative fieldwork. Now the question is, what is innovative and what should fieldwork be? But I think I will give you some examples soon. That's where we have to go. Cross-disciplinary collaboration, so involving climatologists, ecologists, biologists, and so on, environmental scientists, within and beyond academia. I'm saying that because I think both, if only scientists work on these questions, or if only practitioners try to tackle it, it won't be that successful. So I think these collaborations should really go beyond academia or beyond the practice, the farmers. Considering factors and processes that matter, directly or indirectly, that is again the big question. What is the role of the host plants at different spatio-temporal scales? I will give you two examples now. Towards a better understanding of the climate sensitivity of truffle productivity, first of all, we have to understand what are the ecological requirements. This is just an example of the two main species, at least in their spatial extent. Burgundy truffle, Tuber aestivum, Perigord truffle, Tuber melanosporum. And what we did here, and this is still ongoing because we are still working on that, although it has been published last year, but it's still an ongoing task for us to try to quantify and understand the ecological niches, the ecological requirements that are species specific. Only if we understand those, we are able to predict how climate change will affect the species range. So what you see, we were trying to understand what are the requirements of precipitation where are these truffles growing in terms of elevation? What are the soil conditions they prefer and need? And you see differences, but you see also a huge lack of overlap. So the point that I'm making here with this figure is we have to better understand the ecological requirements that are species specific in order to understand how ranges will change in the future, species specific distribution ranges. They also have an effect on productivity, obviously. We are now working on a global assessment. So we are looking into the main truffle producing regions in Europe, but also in the Western United States, in Chile and South America, and South Africa, 2 regions, in Australia and New Zealand. You see them on the global map here. Down you see the different climatic conditions. And now what we did, we are using climate models to look into changes in these regions compared to the global average. So we see that summer temperatures and summer precipitation and soil moisture behave different in the truffle regions compared to the overall mean. The overall mean is a black line. So while the trends, and the thick line, while the trends for temperature are roughly the same, the truffle regions will experience a significantly stronger decrease in precipitation. So what that means, the truffle regions relative to the rest of the globe will experience much stronger drying in the future, these are Mediterranean biogeographic zones, than the rest of the world. So the risk of climate change, predicted climate change, is particularly severe for truffle regions, for all of them that you saw here on the map, compared to the rest. And this is not only seen in the trends, but also in the extremes. We think extremes, the occurrence of climatic extremes, is a big risk. This is often overlooked because whatever system you are implementing, it is becoming less efficient, cost intensive, if changes in extremes, so if a climate or if conditions are more fluctuating. So what we did here, I'm summarizing that, we used 20 global climate models to assess trends, so that on the first picture, and extremes, the occurrence of extremes, so in the second one, in temperature, precipitation, and soil moisture, which is a result of those, for all perigord truffle growing regions in the Americas, so Western US, Chile, Europe, it's Mediterranean mainly, South Africa, 2 regions, and Australia and New Zealand until 2100. So for the next remaining 80 years of the century, compared to the rest of the world, an estimated 2.3 million square kilometers of suitable truffle land will, on average, experience, and that is a key number here, approximately 30% warmer summers with significantly more heat waves and 10 times higher aridification between 2070 and the end of the century. So these numbers should be considered if investments are taken today into new plantations. We also showed that increasing summer precipitation, and that is interesting for some people listening to this talk maybe, that increasing summer precipitation over eastern South Africa and parts of Australia and New Zealand will likely mitigate water shortage. So these are the only regions in our global study in which summer precipitation will not decrease in the future. This is likely connected to internal climate circulations. Our findings are relevant for truffle farmers and businesses to adapt their irrigation systems you saw earlier that I'm still convinced that these irrigation systems are not optimized yet, and management strategies to a warmer and, most importantly, drier future. Towards a better understanding of the risks and the rewards. So it's not only climate change that we have to tackle, and I do that quickly here on this image. So depending on the local to larger scale, the short to longer term, there are different opportunities and challenges. Climate is one of them, but we also have lots of opportunities. So we don't have to go in detail now. This could take us another hour, but my point is, I want to make here, we have to understand an emerging, a growing truffle sector or industry, if we want to understand it, if we want to have it sustainable in a changing environment, we have to consider different factors, different processes that change on scales. So something that is relevant at a local scale might be less relevant on a global scale, vice versa. So things are scale dependent, and only a holistic approach. So if we are really trying to bring in expertise from different disciplines, but also, and most importantly, from farmers. So I mentioned that last year at the talk in Vic, the most important thing, so near to Barcelona, the most important thing we have to do is to be honest with each other, to share data, to aiming for transparency in order to improve our production chain. And a last example, because sometimes I have the feeling we think we know almost everything, but it's exactly the opposite. Our understanding both of the ecology and the biology, so maybe summarized in the life cycle of truffles, is very, very limited. We really don't know a lot. We know that from previous presentations, scientific meetings on that, and the topics that is broadly neglected. And we are now working on that, trying to bring evidence together, is actually to better understand the role, the behavior of truffle dogs. Everyone there, this becomes a very subjective thing, but it shouldn't be. And if we want to use it and improve it scientifically or in a more systematic way, again, we need experience, we have to bring things together. And we are currently working on that, trying to understand the different factors of the behavior of animals, of dogs, of dog owners that interact, they are not independent from each other, relative to the effects of what I'm calling now here the terroir, because that actually nicely describes it. So climate, vegetation, soil management, all these things can have positive and negative effects on the truffle hunting performance of dogs. These effects can also change from positive to negative, for instance, depending on the age of the dog and the relationship with the owner. But you see this on its own, it's a big black box. Everyone thinks who is in the business, yeah, I know how it works. But again, making experience and data transparent, sharing them, will increase our understanding and potentially bring an improvement in how harvest can be performed. Again, this is ongoing work, but it's an exciting field. And again, it shows only if we try to bring everything on the plate, if we try to consider almost everything, we will be able to make bring new insights into the field. Okay, just a couple of pictures at the very end. Yes, we have to understand where, why, and how are truffles growing, how much calcium do they really need, what is their connection to the host species, what is the role of host species, are they mitigating, are they emphasizing climate change, when and how fast are these truffle food bodies growing. I love this image here as a tree ring researcher. So you're looking highly magnified on the surface of a truffle and you see these growth rings? Are they daily growth rings? What are they telling us? They are obviously telling us something. We just don't know yet what. So lots and lots of open questions. And the last slide that I also like a lot is, again, coming back to different scales. How is the fruit body connected to the mycelium? This is a thin section of the truffle surface. And we all know, starting from the biology over to the ecology, including the host species, and then considering the abiotic factors, there is still lots of room for improvement. It's a fascinating field. And again, Fernando, I'm thankful for your kind invitation. I would have loved to join you all, and I wish you a successful meeting. And now I'm open for a couple of short questions, I guess. So thank you very much. I may stop sharing the screen. And now don't tell me that you couldn't hear me.